Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Nico here with the Planning Department. This is a virtual presentation of a community meeting for the University Boulevard Corridor Plan. This is our second virtual meeting on this comprehensive plan for University Boulevard. Next slide, please. So a variety of my colleagues are with me on this virtual meeting this evening, including Luis Estrada, Zubin Adrian Vela, Carrie Sanders, our division chief, Jessica McVeary, our master plan supervisor, and our transportation lead, Alex Bixby, as well as our very able housing planner, Lisa Gavoni, as well. So the purpose of this meeting is really to continue to present to the public where we are on this corridor plan. There's a presentation with some changes that we made to the public last week at Northwood High. So this evening, you'll hear a little bit from me. I'll talk about what we've heard so far in terms of ongoing engagement, a little bit about what we presented to the planning board earlier, and then a little bit about the ULI technical panel work. And then you'll hear a lot from Luis Estrada on the existing University Boulevard public right-of-way conditions coming out from the first public meeting we had late last year. And then you'll also hear from Alex regarding sort of master planning and transportation process that we follow as part of our work. A lot of that has been set forward by decision made a couple of years ago by the county council. Next slide. So in terms of basics, this evening is a presentation, and then you can place any questions you have using the Zoom function here in the Q&A, and we will be addressing your questions after our presentation. So we have about roughly 50 slides. We've added about 4 or 5 more from the last presentation last week. So just give us time to get through it, and if you have questions that come up also, just please place them in the chat function. The Q&A function, I should say. Next slide. So as I noted earlier, we've had our initial kickoff meeting, which was in November of last year. That was an opportunity to tell the public about this plan. We followed it with a virtual meeting as well several days later, and we've continued to meet with civic groups, homeowners groups, property owners, etc., as we sort of develop the plan recommendations. As we'll continue to develop the plan, including its recommendations, which will come later this year. At that first public meeting, we allowed people to sort of give us a perspective of what they think University Boulevard should look like in the future, and clearly improving the walking pedestrian realm was some of the highest desired results that people had, including more crosswalks, more street trees, some bikeway accommodation, as well as some support for some dedicated bus way along the roadway, as well as slowing traffic were some of the major things that we heard from the public. Next slide. As I noted, we had a meeting last week at Northwood High, and likewise highly attended by a variety of members of the public. A lot of questions regarding transportation, and we anticipate that as well this evening. Next slide. So as I noted, we've met virtually with different communities along the corridor. We continue to, our doors are always open to have meetings with the different property owners, as well as civic or homeowners associations. We've had meetings with, as well as working with some of our county partners, with some of the business owners at the Four Corners area, some of the university towers, board, as well as different commissions in the county, including the Commission on People with Disabilities. Next slide. So in terms of, I know many people on this call, and as well as a part of our public meeting, have not been part of a master plan process that the county has done in a number of years, because we have not done, we as a department, we've not done a lot of work in this area. for a number of years. So in terms of where we are, so we typically do scope of work, which went to the board last month, that really provides some of the broad features that the plan will be addressing. And that included the boundary, some background information, a little historic information as well, sort of some of the issues that we think we'll be addressing. So that's sort of the scope of work. Then that's been done. So we're sort of moving forward into more sort of visioning, analysis, sort of putting the building blocks together that it will eventually lead us to have sort of a working or staff draft or preliminary recommendations, and that will come later this year. So we made no, to be clear, we've made no recommendations regarding anything on University Boulevard. So we've not done the work. We need to do the work before we get there. In terms of the rest of our schedule, later this fall into next year, we'll get to the planning board, the planning board draft. Planning board will have its own public hearing, and then come later next year, hopefully we'll have planning board work sessions after the public hearing, and that's where the planning board takes the plan and goes section by section and makes their own changes to the work that myself and my colleagues have put together. And then eventually that document is transmitted to the county executive as well as the county council. The county executive has a function regarding the financial aspect of the recommendations within the draft plan. And then the county council will host its own public hearing open to the public. And after that, it goes through a review of a smaller group of council members. And then it goes to the full council for the council's action and their up and down vote. So that's sort of what's ahead of us over the rest of this year into next year. Next slide. So as part of the information gathering that we sort of put together, we started thinking about this area, is that several things provide us input. Our own professional understanding of the area and looking at market conditions, sort of best practices, et cetera. As well as what we're doing this evening, community input and dialogue, sort of listening to various voices in the community, that's residents, property owners, et cetera. And then outside consultants. So we typically work with a variety of folks, including transportation consultants or market analysis consultants that provide sort of an independent perspective as we build out the plan. So we recently did that with the Urban Land Institute. They did a technical assistance panel, which is a group of roughly 10 professionals from the region. And in Urban Land Institute is a national organization. Their headquarters here in Washington, D.C. They have a variety of chapters across the country as well as internationally. And the technical assistance panel is a 2-day effort where professionals come in, provide direction and recommendations based on the various questions that were asked. And they were asked 4 questions by the planning department. So that's part of the input. It's not, it's really an I-Days gathering exercise that because they're coming in, some folks do not live in Montgomery County. They live in a region. So to bring in a variety of in-depth and understanding of the built environment, including folks who work in transportation, folks who work in finance, as well as urban design and other areas. So next slide. So I'll turn it over to Zubin, who will talk about some of the things that we've heard so far. And I should say that Urban Land Institute presentation was given publicly, and a recording of that is also available on the project website. Zubin.
Thank you, Nkosi. So as Nkosi mentioned, we have done some public outreach so far, and we have collected information from what people have spoken about. So this is just some analysis that we carried out based on community feedback. about what they were talking about when they spoke about transportation issues. So as you can start seeing, the themes that emerge are about safety on University Boulevard, and then of course the bike lanes, which were in November, a very recent event. That pilot project was up front and center in people's minds. So people did speak about a lot around those bike lanes in their conversations with us and in their feedback to us. I want to highlight that this kind of analysis, this document, that this image that you see in front of you is not a static image in some ways, because feedback we'll get from the surveys that we are currently carrying out, and then conversations we have with people in the community, we keep updating this image. So as we engage the community on issues beyond transportation, beyond the street itself, around issues of equity, around issues of environment, these images will start to evolve. So this is just a capture of what we have heard so far. Similarly, if you go to the next slide, please. This is what people spoke about when they spoke about pedestrian safety in general. So we heard a lot about how difficult it was to cross university, how safety was a concern, whether you were a pedestrian or a biker, and the sidewalks and the crosswalks were a major issue around the corridor. And again, not a static image here. What you'll see is this conversation evolves. And as we get feedback from this group and other groups that we'll continue to engage, we'll keep updating these images. Next slide, please. So we also heard a lot in support of the bike walks and in opposition to the bike lane. Sorry. And these are the themes that emerged out of those conversations. So there was universal kind of support for some degree of sidewalks, which made walking along the corridor and even crossing the corridor safer. So this is what we have kind of heard so far. If you go to the next slide, this is a question that we had asked attendees of our last 2 meetings, around 150 odd people, what they would like to see on University Boulevard. And one of the things that emerged consistently was the idea of having wide sidewalks and street trees. There was also support for protected bike lanes and slower traffic in general. Then people also asked for more crosswalks. We recognize that for anyone who's using both sides of the corridor, it's difficult to cross the street because there are limited protected crossings, especially for students. And then again, as I mentioned, there was support for slowing down the traffic because people recognized that speeding was an issue along the corridor. So next slide, please. We have a survey here. You don't have to worry about looking at the QR code right now because we'll share the survey link towards the end of this presentation in the chat. And with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague, Luis, who will speak about the right-of-way.
Good evening, everybody. Luis Estrada with the Planning Department. Next slide, please. Yes, and a big part of the conversations and the explorations that we'll be having as part of the master plan are about how to improve the road itself. So one thing we wanted to do tonight was to talk a little bit about the envelope within which we'll be working. Go to the next slide, please. And that's about it right away. I mean, for those of you who are familiar or are not, the right of way is the land that is reserved for passenger vehicles, utilities, or people once a subdivision is created. And then those strips of land that are reserved for mobility purposes, for the most part, are either owned by the state or the county. It is important for us to help convey how much space do we have available so that it is clear the parameters that within which we'll be working with. And we actually have 2 snippets of record plans of a couple of subdivisions along University Boulevard Corridor that shows the 2 prevailing conditions as far as boundaries is concerned. On the right-hand side, we have a segment of a subdivision that was recorded when the road was still referred to as Old Bladensburg Road. Back then, the recommended right of way, the total of the right of way, the distance between property lines across the road that was required was 100 feet total. And most of the subdivisions back then dedicated to 100 feet. 100 feet. That's what's recorded for the most part on the land records. On the left-hand side, we have a different condition. Starting around the 1970s and 80s, I mean, a number of master plans for the various communities along the road recommended a greater right-of-way, basically foreseeing a greater need for space as the county grew over the years. And after those plans were approved, recommending a right-of-way of 120 feet, then any subdivision that came after those approvals dedicated to a number to 120 feet. So as a result of that, if you go to the next slide, we have the condition that we have illustrated on the map on the left-hand side, where you have a combination of blue and sort of pink lines. That sort of irregular condition is what we have in the corridor today, and those are the lines that are on the land records as they exist today. Some of the lines, the blue ones, are the lines that are still conforming to the 100 feet dimension. That is our primary condition. And then the pink lines are the segments of the road that were subdivided at a later date and that actually dedicated to 120. Those two conditions are to the extent that they are mapped on the road are on the land records. On the right-hand side, the lines that you see in red, we have another set of parameters that we will also be looking at. On 2013, the Countywide Transit Corridors Functional Master Plan recommended that the overall right-of-way for the road would grow to 124 feet. Again, as a recommendation that is made thinking about the future of the road and the future needs of the communities along the road and the kind of facilities that are projected to be accommodated within those boundaries. And there's always an expectation that perhaps a bit more space will be needed. What we will be doing as part of this master plan is evaluating all these different dimensions and trying to figure out, how can we tighten up this envelope? If you go to the next slide. And this is a map that actually illustrates not what's mapped out and recorded on the ground, but what the recommendations are for the various segments of the segment of University Boulevard that is included as part of this master plan. And as you can see, we actually have master plan recommendations. Again, there's a clear distinction between a master plan recommendation and what's mapped on the land records. These are master plan recommendations. And we have, for example, a segment between Amherst Avenue and Dayton Street. This is close to the Wheaton CBD area, and that segment is recommended for 150 feet because there was expected that a greater intensity of uses and transit services would be needed as you get closer to the CBD. Then between Dayton and Lorraine Avenue, the recommendation for the master plan recommendation for the longer segment is 124 dimension that I mentioned before. Then between Lorraine Avenue and Williamsburg Drive, the recommendation is still the recommendation of the master plans that I mentioned before that were created on the 70s and 80s, which was 120 feet. And then the remaining leg, which is between Williamsburg Drive and 495, is 124. All these are, again, master plan recommendations. And part of what we do in a master plan like the one we're doing right now is assess how we can sort of tighten that by exploring the actual facilities that we'll be including within the right of way. Next slide. As a guide to determine how those facilities will lay out, we're following the guidance of the Complete Streets Guide that the planning department prepared and put together, and it was approved. It was published on 2021. That guide explored all the different types of roads that we have within the county and came up with prototypes that basically break down the different types of components that ideally you want to include in each one of the different types of roads if you were to improve it. And then there's sort of a menu of elements that are sort of loosely illustrated here, and I can go a little bit further into that later on my slides. But the type of road that is recommended for this is a boulevard type, and that is because it provides cross-county and regional connectivity, which University Boulevard does. It includes a variety of building and land uses. It will include bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. Includes various land use types, and it will include also landscaping and street lighting, as well as dedicated facilities for buses. That combination of elements is what we will be exploring as part of this master plan. Next slide. But of course, there are challenges, and what we wanted to also be able to help you visualize is the extent of the space that we have to work with, and how does that relate to the structures that are along University Boulevard today. Next slide. This is an illustration of roughly, the condition that we have on the road today. We do have, for the most part, homes that are fronting on University Boulevard. We also have, multifamily buildings, and we have some institutional uses and commercial uses, but the prevailing use is residential. And we wanted to help you see that the extent of the basic right-of-way that is mapped out today includes the totality of the road pavement, the sidewalks that exist today, and there's a little bit of grass beyond the sidewalks that is also part of the existing right-of-way. Now, this illustration is reflecting, the original old Bladensburg Road right-of-way, which was 100 feet. There's a bit of an extension to that with the 120 that I mentioned before, which is not illustrated in this image. But if we go to the next slide, this is the maximum that is recommended. And the difference between these two images, just to be clear, is that the 100 feet that you saw in the image before is a number that is recorded. It's in the land records. So, it's a number that exists on the ground. The 124 is the master planned number that doesn't really exist anywhere yet. So we will be evaluating whether going to this extent will be needed. And if we go to the next slide. And this is sort of a summary slide that includes all the elements that we will be looking at as we consider, the space that we have available and all the wishes that exist for that space. We're looking for improving safety. We're looking to improve access management to and from the road. To the extent possible, we're looking to have continuous sidewalks and bikeways, and to have safe streets crossings at more frequent locations that we have today, and also to achieve safety by separating the different mobility types. And we will be exploring the possibility of having wider and buffered sidewalk. By buffered, we mean protected from the vehicles on the road. We will look for the opportunity to implement continuous share use path. A share use path is a facility that in which bicycles and pedestrians are using the same space, versus protected byway facilities, which are dedicated facilities only for bicycles. And then, of course, we'll be looking at alternatives for what does dedicated transit mean within a corridor like this, and what would make sense to implement in here. And then the illustration that we have on the left-hand side is sort of a combination of the various things that we will be exploring as part of the master plan, and showing you, the type of resolution we're hoping to achieve in our conversations with you throughout this process. And now what we'll do is that I'm going to pass the baton to Alex, who's going to be talking about the transportation considerations that also will have to be folded into all this conversation.
Great, thank you, Luis. So on the next slide, I'll give a mini overview of the topics that I'll be talking about. Three big points. I wanted to start with giving a little bit of context about the Complete Streets policy in Montgomery County, and then I'll talk a little bit about the master plan transportation adequacy measures that were required to evaluate the master plan with, and then finally, I'll talk about some other important transportation considerations. So just to lead off, and I apologize for starting with reading verbatim a slide, but this is important context. The Montgomery County Code lays out a complete streets policy for the county, and this is the policy framework that we're working in as we're beginning to do our analysis and think about recommendations for the plan. So the policy states that each county road and street must be designed so that the safety and convenience of all users of the roadway system, including pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, automobile drivers, commercial vehicles and freight haulers, and emergency service vehicles, is accommodated. Each road and street must facilitate multimodal use and assure that all users can travel safely in the public right-of-way. So I just wanted to lead off with that, and that Luis just showed a variety of different treatments that we'll be considering. Again, we don't have specific recommendations yet, but these are the needs that we're thinking about as we're planning for the corridor. So on the next slide, another thing that we're required to do as we once we've completed our recommendations is to evaluate them for transportation adequacy. And historically, the way that was done was with vehicular level of service. And on the next slide, I'll explain a little bit more what that is. But some folks might be familiar, but we're moving from vehicular level of service to a variety of other transportation performance metrics. This is at the direction of the County Council Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee that came in late 2020. And it really reflects that intersection level vehicular delay does not reflect the diverse travel needs and experiences in the plan area or in any plan area. And there was some concern about false precision in long-term master plan analysis. I will say that MCDOT will still address near-term operational considerations, things like signal timing and intersection operations. So on the next slide, what is intersection level of service? So intersection LOS is a qualitative measure of roadway intersection operating conditions that folks might be familiar with. Letter grades A through F are sometimes keyed to a color scale as well. And that qualitative measure is evaluated using a variety of quantitative measures. So there's no one single measure used to evaluate level of service, but some of the measures that can be quantified are average vehicle delay. So that's the number of seconds that it takes for a vehicle to pass through an intersection, weighted by each approach's respective volume. So you can imagine that on a major corridor like University Boulevard, there's lots more traffic moving along University Boulevard than there is on the streets approaching it. So even though a few vehicles might be approaching the corridor from the side streets and they might have to wait for a signal, for example, to turn left onto the corridor, if the traffic is moving along the corridor, that delay would be lower, and that would be accounted for in the average. Critical lane volume is another way to look at this, which is the volume of the most constrained conflicting movements through the intersection. So again, if you have a large volume of travel moving along a corridor, trying to cross left turning movements, that might be the most constrained movement. And then a final way to think about this is volume to capacity ratio, which is a ratio of the number of the vehicles that are able to move through the intersection to the capacity of the intersection. So now moving into the new metrics that are required, the Fed committee laid out 5 metrics that we'll be evaluating to assess the adequacy for transportation of the master plan. So I'll go into each one of these in a little bit more detail over the next 5 slides. The first one is accessibility to jobs, and that's measured for auto and separately for transit. Travel time for all trips measured for auto and transit. Vehicle miles traveled per capita. Non-auto driver mode share for journey to work trips, and low stress bicycle accessibility. And one finer point is that low stress bicycle accessibility is assessed for the effect of any changes in the plan area on accessibility throughout the entire county, while the other metrics are reported at the policy area level, which is a geography that's much tighter to the plan area. So that first measure, accessibility to jobs, is a measure of the number of jobs that can be reached within 45 minutes. And one of those measures is for auto, and it's measured the same way, but separately for transit. And so the figure that's on the screen shows an example from downtown Bethesda of the area that can be reached within 45 minutes by auto during the peak commute period, and a similar figure for transit. And you can see that the area that's covered that can be reached by transit is much smaller than that by auto. And the metric would take all of the jobs that are located in that area, sum them all up, and that would be the number of jobs that could be accessed. Next slide. Travel time was the next measure, and this reflects the total amount of time people need to travel to accomplish their trip purposes. And this is for all of the trips, so not just the commute trips, but all trips to and from the area on a weekday. And this also would have separate values for auto and transit. So for this one, you would add up the time that it takes to make all of the trips to, from, or within the corridor, average that out. So that could include commute trips, it could include trips for shopping, visiting family and friends, any of these purposes would be included, and then divided by the time it takes them to calculate an average per trip travel time. Next slide. So the third measure is vehicle miles traveled per capita, and this is a measure of the total weekday vehicle miles traveled for trips to, from, and within the area, divided by the total residents and workers served. So this is kind of starts from a similar place as the travel time metric, but instead of measuring time, we're measuring the total distance. And this is only for trips made by automobile. So we're summing up all of the miles that are traveled in a vehicle, and then dividing that total by all of the people who are in the area. So both the residents who live here and also the workers who are present in the area. Fourth measure is non-auto driver mode share, and this is the percent of trips for commute trips made by a mode other than driving alone. So that could include walking, biking, rolling, carpooling, taking the bus, taking the train, and a variety of other travel modes. So you sum up all of the trips made by all modes as the denominator, and then all of the trips except for single occupant vehicle trips, and that's the non-auto driver mode share. And then the final measure is low stress bicycle accessibility. And this is the percent of potential bicycle trips that are accommodated on the low stress network. The URL on the screen, mcatlas.org/bikestress, is available. That's an interactive tool that you can use to look at the level of traffic stress on all of the roadways in the county. And the figure on the screen shows University Boulevard, and you can see that University Boulevard generally is in the high and moderate traffic stress, inappropriate for children and most adults. While a lot of the neighborhood streets farther off the corridor are in the low or very low stress categories that are a little more comfortable for bicycling. And so this metric would look at all of the trips that could be made by bicycle, and that would be the denominator. And then in the numerator is all of the trips that could be made by bicycle that would only be made on those low and very low stress links. Next slide. So those are the measures that we are required to evaluate to ensure that the plan is adequate from a transportation adequacy perspective. But there are, of course, a lot of other important transportation considerations that we'll have in mind as we're developing recommendations for the plan. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on these as well, but some of the key factors that we're thinking about are eliminating severe and fatal crashes, and in service of that, controlling speeds, pedestrian safety and comfort, including an improved streetscape, bicycle safety and comfort, transit service, and vehicular volumes. Next slide. So eliminating severe and fatal crashes, this figure shows the serious injury and fatal crashes between 2015 and 2020, the most recent available data that we have. And you can see that there are lots of crashes along University Boulevard, unfortunately. This figure just shows the severe and fatal crashes, but you can also find on our website a similar map that includes all of the crashes. But in this time period, there were 3 fatalities, 2 of which were pedestrians, and 20 serious injuries, 6 of whom were pedestrians and 1 bicyclist. So this is certainly something we're concerned about and working to improve. Next slide. So in that vein, I wanted to mention Vision Zero and the concept of Vision Zero. So Vision Zero is an international effort to achieve 0 deaths and serious injuries on our roadways due to traffic crashes. This is international and also in the United States. And in the United States, it's in response to approximately 40,000 traffic fatalities that we've been experiencing annually. And I wanted to highlight that Montgomery County has a Vision Zero policy that was adopted in 2017. And a little bit about Vision Zero and how it contrasts with the traditional approach to traffic safety. So traditionally, traffic deaths have been thought of as inevitable, and we've seen, unfortunately, far too many of them. Vision Zero would take the approach that traffic deaths are preventable. So there are things we can do to eliminate severe and fatal crashes. The traditional design approach expects perfect human behavior, while Vision Zero understands and acknowledges that human failing is possible, and it integrates the possibility of human failing into an approach. The traditional approach is to prevent collisions, whereas the Vision Zero approach acknowledges that collisions will occur, but the effort is to prevent fatal and severe crashes. And I'll talk in a moment a little bit about how we focus on that. The traditional approach includes focusing on individual responsibility, and Vision Zero takes more of a systems approach. So while individuals do have responsibility for their actions, they are operating in a broader system that needs to be designed to allow for human failure without the consequence of severe injury or fatality. And finally, the conventional wisdom is that saving lives is expensive, and the Vision Zero approach is that saving lives is not expensive. We just have to make the right decisions. So in terms of how we can create safety with a Vision Zero perspective, it really boils down to decreasing the frequency of crashes, and when those crashes do occur, decreasing the severity of those crashes. So one of the ways that we can decrease crash frequency is to reduce conflicts, specifically between vehicles and other more vulnerable road users. So that could involve designating space for different users and providing predictability for where the users interact. So these are some images of separated facilities for pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users in various contexts. One other thing we can do to decrease crash frequency is increase the ability of drivers and other road users to yield. And so speed is a major factor in that ability. So the figure on the screen shows the field of vision at various speeds ranging from 40 miles per hour down to 15 miles per hour. And at 40 miles per hour, the driver's vision is concentrated in a very narrow field and requires them to scan across the roadway to be able to see different locations. Whereas as you approach slower speeds, 15 miles per hour, you can see that the pedestrian standing on the corner comes into the field of view and would allow the driver to yield to that pedestrian. This next slide speaks to crash severity. So if unfortunately collisions do occur, the speed at which they occur is really crucial to the outcomes for the people involved in that crash. And so when hit by a vehicle traveling at 20 miles per hour, 9 out of 10 pedestrians are likely to survive. Whereas when hit by a vehicle traveling at 40 miles per hour, only 1 out of 10 of those pedestrians is likely to survive. And so everything I've been describing is based on national and international research and information, but I also wanted to highlight that the department has conducted a predictive safety assessment, which is an analysis of roadway factors and crash experience within Montgomery County itself. And some of the things that they found were, of course, as is expected, as activity increases and exposure increases, that crashes increase. But even controlling for that and setting that aside, wider roadways are associated with significantly increased numbers of crashes. So increasing from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, or again, from 4 lanes to 6 lanes increases the likelihood of a crash by 40% each time. And higher speeds are also associated with increased crash risk. A 5 mile per hour increase in the speed limit increases crash likelihood by 15%, and a 10 mile per hour increase increases the likelihood even further, 32%. Next slide. So with the understanding that speed is an important factor in crashes, I wanted to share a little bit of information that was collected by MDOT-SHA during the temporary bike lane installation. This shows the speeds on University Boulevard traveling westbound. And I just wanted to highlight that 81% of the vehicles were exceeding the posted speed limit of 35 miles per hour. So if you think back to that survival rate image, that puts many of the vehicles in 40 miles per hour or above, which makes it extremely unlikely that a pedestrian would survive a crash. Next slide. And this just shows similar information for the eastbound direction. So again, 86% of vehicles in this case were exceeding the posted speed limit, and 16% of the vehicles exceeded the speed limit by 10 miles per hour or more. Next slide. So pedestrian safety and comfort is another thing that we'll be focused on in this plan. And again, there's another URL on the screen, mcatlas.org/pedplan. And this is another interactive tool that you can visit to explore the pedestrian level of comfort. This again, similar to the bike metric, but for pedestrians, looks at a variety of built environment factors like how wide the sidewalks are, how well separated they are from traffic, the speed of the adjacent traffic, and more. To evaluate the comfort level of those roadways. And so again, you can see that University Boulevard scores in the undesirable, which is the lowest category of pedestrian comfort. Next slide. Transit service is also an important consideration for the plan. So Montgomery County Ride-On operates service along the corridor, as does Metrobus. And there's an upcoming MCDOT tactical bus only lane project between Amherst and Dennis. And I think we can probably share information on the MCDOT website for that, but they'll be conducting a separate community meeting upcoming. I believe that's on March 30th. This is also a planned bus rapid transit corridor, according to the Countywide Transit Corridors Functional Master Plan. And I just wanted to highlight the importance of the intersection of University and Columbia Pike, or 29, where there's a connection to the existing Ride-On Flash blue and orange routes, and that there's also a project underway there to provide dedicated lanes for that service. So this is a key transit intersection. Next slide. Finally, vehicle volumes are also an important consideration in this corridor. This shows the annual average daily traffic on University Boulevard over the past 10 years between 2011 and 2021. And you can see that traffic has actually been pretty stable over the course of the past decade. There's a bit of a dip, as can be expected, in 2020 during the lockdown and the height of the pandemic, but volumes have begun to increase again since then. Next slide. And finally, I just wanted to highlight the Four Corners area, and this is certainly an area that we're aware can be challenging to navigate. There are counterintuitive and complex left turn operations. So the figure shows if you're, for example, heading northbound on 29 and wanting to make a left onto University Boulevard, the intuitive thing to do might be to move into the left lane and prepare to make that left-hand turn. And there is signage to direct motorists otherwise, but it can be counterintuitive to move to the far right-hand lane on 29, take a right onto University Boulevard, merge across the lanes of traffic to the left to then make a U-turn onto University Boulevard to continue to the west, for example. So this is an area we'll be giving special attention to. I also wanted to note that there's a high degree of pedestrian activity, and with the high school there, a lot of pedestrian activity of younger people on the roadways. And also, again, just highlighting that this is a key transit node where the 29 BRT comes together with high volumes of transit along University Boulevard. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Nkosi to describe our future engagement.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. So coming next, we'll have a variety of additional public meetings, and the next one is going to be about next month. And we're really going to do something a little bit different. It's going to be more community-oriented workshop, starting to listen to what the public's saying, public's desires, etc. More information of that will be forthcoming in the next several weeks. But as we continue to move forward, we'll be addressing issues regarding economic development and housing, parks, open space, historic preservation, environmental and sustainability measures as well. So it's a comprehensive plan, and these are the elements that we will be presenting and listening to the public's issues and concerns and recommendations, as well as targeting specific areas of the plan area, especially the multifamily buildings, figuring out how we could work with some of those property owners, looking at specific engagement regarding the Hispanic community, and then willing and open to doing walking tours, workshops, etc., with members of the public. Next slide. So we've set up an interactive map that's available on the project's website, where you could go in and add your comments and perspective on how to potentially make different changes along the corridors and different. So it's quite a useful tool. It's something that we've used in the department and in other plan areas. So definitely invite all the participants on this webinar to go online and check it out and participate and put in your comments there. Next slide. So finally, this is my contact information as well as Zubin, as well as the project website. So with that, we will sort of open the floor for Q&A.
Nkosi, I just wanted to give the community members a few minutes to respond to the survey. So I'm going to post the survey link in the chat right now, and maybe we'll take 5 minutes, 7 minutes to respond to the survey while we tee up the questions. So we have been getting quite a few questions in the Q&A session portion of the chat here. So I'll be directing them to my colleagues, and hopefully we'll be able to answer as many questions as we can. Some of the questions have been answered in the Q&A already, so some of you can review those too. So just posting the survey link right now.
Okay, so then let's roll with the questions.
Sounds good. Thank you. And yeah, of course, if you need more time for the survey, please carry on while we direct these questions. So the first question is for, I guess, Nkosi and Alex together. The question is, on the map, the area off of Kerwin Road shows the project coming all the way in as far as Proctor. Why would the widening of University need to come as far in to the Sligo neighborhood, the Sligo Woods neighborhood?
Yes, so the plan area boundary is a balancing act in terms of setting it. And what we did was to really consider, institutions that are along the corridor. We really want to include all the religious institutions, all the schools, parks, etc. So I think that's sort of the sort of larger picture. And then we also wanted to have an approach where we're at least at a minimum a block or 2 blocks off the corridor that sort of makes sense, not to be too skinny, not to be too fat, sort of in between. So although in some cases it may extend further, that does not mean we're going to be making sort of recommendations sort of way beyond the corridor. We're really going to be focused and targeted in our recommendations to really things that are happening on the corridor. And if there are any changes, any land use changes, so in context, we'll be trying to figure out what's that right balance regarding if there are any changes that we're recommending along the roadway. And then what's the context of that? So although the boundary may extend it, the neighborhood, that does not necessarily mean we'll be making, specific recommendations of 2 blocks from University Boulevard.
Thank you, Nkosi. And I'm going to pull Alex into the next one for sure. So the question is, can the existing sidewalk be pushed back from the curb with a green space? This would enhance the road looks and protect pedestrians. Separately, a dedicated bus/bike lane doesn't seem justified given the frequency of buses on University compared to cars. Bus infrastructure is lacking, and a dedicated bus lane won't fix the problem.
Yeah, thank you. So to the first question about existing sidewalk being pushed back with a green space, I think that's something that we can consider. As folks have mentioned, we're not quite to the point of making recommendations at this point. And as Luis described, there are some roadway right-of-way challenges with trying to accommodate all of these different treatments in the University Boulevard right-of-way. But in terms of the safety points that I was making earlier, in terms of what would improve pedestrian comfort, I think those are really great ideas and something that we'll need to consider. To the point about the dedicated bus or bike lane, I think existing use is one way to think about this, and we'll certainly be looking at transit ridership data. We don't have all of that data processed yet, but I have heard that this is one of the highest ridership routes in the state, the C2 and C4 routes along University. But we'll be thinking about those volumes. But I also maybe want to encourage folks to think about the options that are provided to people using the corridor, and ensuring kind of going back to that complete streets policy that I was describing before, that there are options for all modes and all users to safely and comfortably use the roadway. So we'll be weighing those sorts of considerations as we're thinking about developing our recommendations.
Thanks, Alex. Nkosi, the next question I think would be for us, which is what outreach has been done before now? The person contends that no community groups whose membership includes only individuals who live in University Boulevard Corridor have been consulted so far. So,
yeah, so we started this process by notifying all property owners along up and down the corridor, multifamily, single family, etc. Late last year, we made a decision to extend the boundary into Wheaton, and in that case, we into Amherst. We notified everyone that was within that portion of the plan area. So we've made multiple mailings. We recently mailed multifamily residents within the corridor specifically. So we're continuing to make different approaches to meet people, regardless of where they're living along the corridor. We started out notifying civic and homeowners groups. We've met with a few of them so far. We anticipate next month to have another meeting with the North Four Corners group coming up. So if there's any groups that are out there, we're willing to come meet you anytime during, we're sort of flexible during the day, in the evening, Saturdays, whatever would work for you.
Yeah, I'll echo what Nkosi just said. And yeah, I mean, if your group wants to meet with us, we're just an email away. And yeah, we have gone to a few civic associations meetings, their board meetings or their community meetings so far, and mostly virtually. But of course, we are happy to come to your space. If you're meeting in a gym or in a school space, we are happy to join you there. And Nkosi, while I have you, the next question is for you too, which is my home falls within the boundary. What does that mean for my property and for my street? The person hasn't specified a street or a property. So if you could kind of generally answer this question.
Yeah, I think generally in principle, we're really focusing on University Boulevard. We will be looking at neighborhood streets to figure out, how we could maybe improve local bikeway opportunities, if that's realistic, as one approach in terms of bikeway accommodation. But in terms of significant changes, any particular change in terms of NIBS not to be going down that road in terms of significant changes. So, and even on University Boulevard, I think our approach has been, at least internal conversation so far, is really going to be sort of surgical in nature and making specific changes, recommendations, at least as part of the plan or plan recommendations, and then to the planning board in terms of being very specific in terms of where we're going to make any different land use and zoning changes than what we have today. But that's work that will be done during the summer, and then we'll be presenting that publicly later.
Yeah. Thank you, Nkosi. And this is a question which I'm hoping Jessica or Carrie and Nkosi, of course, you're with us, so you can answer this too. it says most of the Kemp community was against the bike lane, and yet the pilot study went forward. If most of the community is again against the bus pilot, will it still go forward? Do citizens of this county have a say, or are these informational sessions dictating to us what will happen, not asking us if we want them to happen?
Hi, Zubin. Thank you for that question. And thanks to all of you for being here with us tonight. I do want to note that the University Boulevard Corridor Plan that we're here to discuss with you all this evening is an effort by Montgomery Planning to work with all of you to plan for the future of University Boulevard. And that includes the land uses that align the roadway, and it includes the roadway itself. And while we're sort of thinking about the long-term vision of University Boulevard and the surrounding communities, our colleagues in the implementing agencies like MCDOT are working on projects to improve conditions on the ground today. And MCDOT is hosting a community meeting on March 30th to discuss the tactical bus lane project. And we can certainly share information related to that meeting in the chat with you all tonight. We would certainly encourage you all to participate in that meeting as well. And we're grateful that you're here with us tonight.
Thank you, Jessica. And Alex, if you can help us with the next question. This question is a little specific, which is, can we get actual numbers for actual traffic, total peak/rush hour on University Boulevard, and how that compares to industry standards on how many lanes there should be to handle that traffic volume?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So one of the slides in the presentation does present M.SHA collects data on annual average daily traffic on major roadways like University Boulevard. And so I can say that the volumes have varied somewhere between 23,000 or so up to a little above 30,000 a day in the stretch of University Boulevard west of Arcola Avenue. And east of Arcola Avenue, somewhere short of 34,000 vehicles a day, up to about 43,000 vehicles per day over the course of the past 10 years. So it does certainly vary. So I guess on the vehicles per day front, I would say that there isn't necessarily an industry standard per se, but one reference point that I could give is that there are roadways that have accommodated up to 25,000 vehicles per day on 2 lanes, so 1 lane in each direction. So, with that in mind, with the current 6 lanes, or even thinking about 4 lanes during the pilot on University Boulevard, I think those are within the range of what can be accommodated. To the point about specific peak hours, I think as was mentioned earlier, we're just getting started on our actual analysis and recommendations, and so we will be collecting data in a more granular form, but we're still developing that scope.
Thanks, Alex. So the next question I think I'll take, which is, did your survey at the other meetings include a question about whether people would be willing to give up 2 lanes of traffic for any of the survey options? And the answer to that is no. We'd not specifically say, would you be willing to give up lanes? Mostly because that's not a developed recommendation yet from our end as Montgomery Planning. We did have a option as, would you like things to stay the same? And from current responses, we saw about 10% people saying that they would like the things to stay the same. Of course, a caveat to that is there were people who said people would like the things to stay the same, but would also want pedestrian safety to improve. So there was a little bit of sort of dissonance there to an extent. But yeah, as I mentioned, since the recommendation from Montgomery Planning is not to take away 2 lanes or anything to that effect yet, it's hard to ask a question based on a hypothetical. So Alex, I'm going to pull you in for the next one again, which is the intersection between University Boulevard and Route 29 is terrible. The lights are slow and the intersection is very confusing for University Boulevard. What can be done to address this? Perhaps an over-underpass like what was done at Randolph and Georgia Avenue. Thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think we see a similar challenge, and hopefully the slide that was included in the presentation conveys an understanding of that challenge of the confusion of navigating that intersection. I think that is something that we'll want to give special attention to. Again, we haven't concluded anything yet or even really begun our recommendations, but I think that's certainly something we can consider as we think about how to treat that area. I think we might also think about creative solutions, other creative solutions to reconfiguring that intersection.
I'm going to hang on to you, Alex, for a little bit more, which is for the next question. To improve pedestrian safety, would it be possible to add pedestrian overpass bridges at highly used crossing points? And the examples given here are near schools, parks, shopping centers, etc.
Yeah, that's also a good question, and I think my response will probably be similar in that I understand that crossing University Boulevard can be challenging in many places. I think we'd probably look to other solutions before going to a pedestrian overpass, with the interest of making it safe for even larger numbers of pedestrians to cross the street safely and conveniently. I think one of the challenges with pedestrian overpasses is sometimes it makes things more difficult for people who have limited mobility to either ascend a ramp or whatever the solution is to get them up above grade and then across the road and then back down. But all that said, I think we're still open to considering a variety of solutions for improving pedestrian safety and pedestrian crossings of the corridor.
Yeah, that's an excellent point about the fact that not everybody can use an overpass. So again, Alex, you're very popular tonight, and I'm going to direct the next question to you too. Again, which is looking at the bicycle stress map, even Arcola, which has significant traffic calming measures, and is only 1 or 2 lanes in each direction, mostly 1, is marked in red, high stress. Do we really expect anything short of a totally dedicated bike lane to move University to a low stress situation, which and this is a parenthetical comment, which wouldn't then allow for BRT aside from likely removing a lane in each direction of regular traffic?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it sounds like a lot of folks are identifying this challenge that we're having of a variety of needs in a limited corridor. So to the question about what would it take to reach, motion detector lights are going off because I'm sitting very still. What would it take to reduce the bicycle level of traffic stress on the corridor, especially on University Boulevard? So yes, that it would involve either reducing the speeds, reducing the number of lanes, or providing a protected facility are probably the biggest things that would move the needle on that. And considering the magnitude of University Boulevard, I think it probably would end up requiring a dedicated facility for bicyclists along the corridor.
Great. And the next question is for you too again, which is, what is the likelihood of death or serious injury when drivers speed because of reducing speed limit to a ridiculously low number, which is what this presentation seems to be suggesting?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to respond to that. I think, again, starting from safety, I think keeping speeds at a safe level in an environment where you expect people to be crossing the roadway. There are a lot of transit passengers, there are a lot of schools in the corridor, and people in neighborhoods looking to cross the roadway. So I think drivers along the corridor should be expecting to encounter other road users. And in those cases, I think we'll be looking to establish an appropriate speed. I think along with the setting of a speed limit comes, physical roadway design characteristics that would also encourage people to travel at that speed. So I do understand that if you're on a roadway that is designed for a much higher speed and a lower speed limit is set, compliance with that lower speed limit can be a challenge. Things like automated enforcement can help with that somewhat, but people tend to drive faster than the speed limit when the road is designed for a speed faster than the speed limit. So I think that's something that we'll also be looking at as part of the plan, is to think about ways to appropriately design the roadway so that we achieve the target speeds that we're looking for.
And Kosi, I'm going to pull you in for this next question, which is more about the community. So how can people be assured that you will conduct a fair survey of people's opinions and concerns to the project? So how will you ensure that the feedback you receive is fairly represented?
We've been sort of open for business, so we meet with any and every one. So we've been trying to get to different people, different communities. So we've made an effort in this plan to be open, meaning we didn't have an appointed committee, which we've done in previous plans, like an advisory committee. So as people come into the door, the last meeting, in-person meeting, we only had less than 10 people plus or minus that were at our first open house meeting. So we had a whole group of new people in. Likewise tonight, I don't know how many people participated in the last virtual conversation. So our efforts are really open. And again, we're willing to meet with folks. At least I'm willing to meet you during a Saturday if you want to meet one person or two people. It doesn't really matter as far as I'm concerned. So we want to really, hear different voices. I think the best plans really bring together all the challenges that we have on this corridor. So that's our approach. We're open. We were in the community, meeting with people. We're working with different organizations with different parts of Montgomery County government and business liaison group in terms of using their expertise to meet with business owners, and likewise, we're trying to establish different partnerships with other groups in the area.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nkosi. And I would also want to add to that our process of analyzing feedback is basically the process that uses qualitative research methods. So we are in some way safeguarding ourselves from being biased in any way also, because we want to make sure that we analyze the feedback in as scientific a way as possible and then represent it similarly through methods. So it's interesting because sometimes when you're doing this analysis, even you don't know exactly what your results are going to be. So we want to be as rigorous in our methodology of analyzing community feedback as possible. And as a footnote to that, we have 102 attendees right now in this conversation. So, I'm seeing over 70 odd questions. So if your questions are not answered, it's not because we are ignoring them or we don't want to acknowledge your feedback. It's simply the quantum of it is really positively high. So speaking of which, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is for Amy, which is, I'd like to hear more about what kind of trees will be planted for the street trees. I encourage native trees whenever possible.
Sure. Hi. Thanks so much for that question, which I also put an answer in the online questions. Just to let you know, MCDOT does have a street tree list, and these trees are trees that we know will be more pollution tolerant, more salt tolerant, and generally best suited for street trees. That being said, there are many native trees on that list, and we will definitely encourage their use, because one of the major advantages that native trees have over non-native trees is that they also are better for the soil because they provide both habitat and food for the insect community, which is extremely important for the environmental health. We don't get anywhere without the insects, and also for things like birds and squirrels and things like that. So thank you for that question. But yes, we will definitely be looking for the use of native trees.
Thank you so much, Amy. So Alex, I'm going to pull you back into this conversation, which is, would bike lanes be created by a series of poles? All the photos show beautifully colored lanes without poles. The poles/bike lanes on Old Georgetown Road have been met with much anger and dissatisfaction by drivers. Would bike lanes on University Boulevard differ?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So I think by the poles, the question is referring to the flex posts, the flexible posts that are installed to give some vertical indication of where the edge of the bike lane is. To University Boulevard, I think we're a long way from coming to those conclusions. I think I would point to the bicycle master plan that was developed countywide and has been adopted and approved, and the facility that's called for in the bicycle master plan is for a side path on the north side of University Boulevard, or I guess I would say the east side of University Boulevard, which would be more separated from traffic and would not involve those flex posts. But yeah, I would say at this point, the specific treatment, sorry, let me back up. This plan will look at those recommendations from the bicycle master plan, and based on the other needs in the corridor and the right of way, and a lot of challenging decisions that we'll have to make along the way, identify a facility type for the roadway. But if it goes in the direction of what's in the bicycle master plan, that would be a side path that's separated from traffic and at a different grade. I hope that helps to answer the question.
Thanks. So for the next question, I want to pull in Nkosi and Luis primarily, which is, at what stage will it be determined that what right of way will be used? If it was determined that 120 feet of right of way was necessary, what would be the required one what would be required of the county? So
I think we have to figure out the different elements within the right of way. What are the different things we're trying to accomplish? Right, we know we want a wide sidewalk, we want street trees. What will happen with buses? So I think our approach is likely that we will have like a variety of alternatives or options. We may establish it, maybe segment by segment. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's sort of given the lay of the land that we know between the 120. The 124, and also we have to balance the impacts. We really, we said from the get-go, is that we're really trying to minimize impacts on property owners along the corridor. So that's going to be a driving decision regarding what type of right of way we settle on. But we're probably going to have either one or two options, maybe three options, based on the different segments along the corridor. Luis, what are your thoughts?
And see, some of the images that we shared in the presentation are representative of high-level aspirations that we have for each one of the components that we are hoping to work into the overall section, but the shape that they ultimately take and how much space do they actually occupy will depend, as Nkosi was saying, on the space we have available, which may vary from segment to segment, and on the conversations we have with our colleagues and the transportation agencies in the county and state to determine demand and potential use. So there's a lot of discussions that need to happen between us and our colleagues before we can actually come back to you with a potential set of recommendations. And as Nkosi was mentioning, it's likely going to be a set of recommendations. It'll be like a set of alternatives. So we could do either 1, 2, or 3, depending on the variety of scenarios that we encounter along the road as we do the work that we're just starting to do.
Thanks, Nkosi. Thanks, Luis. Luis, before you go, I have one more question coming your way. And if I'm understanding this question properly, which is, can you give a specific example of why it's necessary for the boundary, and I assume this means the right-of-way, to exceed the 124-foot right-of-way? You said it just makes sense, but there must be some reasons, some specific reasons why.
Typically, when a master plan recommends a greater right of way than was dedicated, is always looking at the future of the facility, which is what every master plan does. At a certain point, when these communities were being developed, all that was contemplated as a need was the 100 feet that was dedicated in the beginning. But as the county grows and traffic increases and there's more demand for other types of mobility to also be incorporated into the right of way that exists, then transportation planners that are working with the county and with transportation agencies start the process of recommending a greater right of way so that they can potentially accommodate all these additional facilities that may be coming in. Now, that's when we come in with a plan like this one, that we can use to actually look at it in more detail and then assess how can we make it as tight as possible? And because that's one of the goals that we have. We understand that people move across from one side of the corridor all the time. And those crossing distances are a big deal to us in terms of safety. So I mean, it isn't a set deal that we will have to go to the 124 dimension, but that's one of the parameters that we will be looking at.
Thank you, Luis. Nkosi, I'm going to pull you back in, and although this question may have some, we probably need some expert help from our historic preservation colleagues. And the question is about what are the historic places along University Boulevard that you are that your plan is taking into consideration?
Yeah, so we have the WTOP property. The building is listed on the master plan of historic resources. Our colleagues in historic preservation, I don't believe they're on this call, but they're exploring property along University Boulevard near the intersection of Amherst in that vicinity. And then off the corridor, we have the polychrome houses, which are off of near Lanark or one of those other streets. I don't remember the street that those polychrome houses are on. So those are a couple of the resources that are within either the planned area or the vicinity. But they obviously will be doing a lot more work regarding looking back and then making recommendations as we sort of build out the plan.
Thank you. Alex, I'm going to pull you back into this conversation. And the question here is, can you say a bit more about the statistics for crashes and how they were sourced? The numbers seemed a little low at first glance.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess to the point about the numbers seeming low, I think I might have noted during the presentation, but I'll reemphasize that these were only the crashes that resulted in fatalities and severe injuries. And so there were many more crashes that resulted in lesser injuries and also just property damage crashes as well. I think hopefully we can put in the Q&A response and I can provide the link to the website where that's available online. There's an interactive crash map that the department provides, and it's based primarily on Montgomery County Police Department reports when crashes occur. So hopefully that helps to answer the question. I'll see if we can get that posted in the Q&A as well.
Thanks, Alex. Nkosi, the next question is for, I guess, you and me, which is many civic associations are not well attended. How are you reaching all those folks who may not even be aware of these changes?
Yeah, that's a good point. Mailing people, the mail is probably our backstop in what we've been approaching in terms of public engagement. So if there's a civic group that's out there that's not active, but if they're representatives or people that live in the community, please let us know. So at least we could establish a contact with you and you could be a conduit to sort of sharing the information. If the information is not updated as well, just let us know as well. We could point you in direction in terms of updating your information. So you'll get not only information regarding this planning effort, but in terms of other noticing work that the department is doing on other projects. So it's really sort of a combination of efforts we're trying to get to in terms of mailing civics, mailing people individually, and trying to inform people about the project.
Thanks, Nkosi. Jessica, I'm going to pull you in for this upcoming question because it deals with the more sort of holistic nature of corridor planning. The person asks, I'm curious if there are any other corridor boulevard/boulevard plans with similar needs to University Boulevard that have been successfully implemented in the county. There have certainly been many changes to Montrose Road, Randolph/Georgia Avenue, and several more, but none of these have similar aspects to University Boulevard. There's also a parenthetical note here, which is, I'm thrilled to see all the considerations you're taking. We are raising our family here, ages 5 and 6 currently, and look forward to a more bikeable and walkable and safe corridor.
Thank you for that question. So corridors have been something that we have planned for a very long time in Montgomery County, as many of you know, beginning with the 1964 Wedges and Corridors Plan. And corridors continue to be an important consideration for us in Thrive Montgomery 2050. And we're specifically focusing on our bus rapid transit corridors, those corridors that were identified in the 2013 plan that Nkosi and Alex mentioned in the presentation that are planned for bus rapid transit. And we recently completed, I guess it's not so recent anymore. In 2019, we completed a plan for Veers Mill Road from Wheaton to Rockville that focused on many of the same issues that we're exploring here today. And that plan really focused on how can we envision the corridor over the long term to make sure that we are accommodating all users along that roadway. So bus rapid transit, people walking, biking, rolling, people using transit. And how can we identify opportunities for people to cross the road more safely at more frequent intervals? With that planning effort, we did have short-term strategies as well as a long-term vision. And I'm really pleased to say that our partner agencies, the Montgomery County Department of Transportation and the State Highway Administration, have been working hard to implement those short-term strategies, including doing things like adding additional protected crossings and signals at schools or near schools to allow kids to cross the street safely. And so that's, some of the work that we've done in recent years that will hopefully inform some of the conversations that we have here. We have also done other planning efforts around corridors, both for Maryland 355 in the North Bethesda area, as well as the Forest Glen, Montgomery Hills area. So we're hoping to take lessons learned from those planning processes and apply them here.
Thank you, Jessica. Alex, I'm going to pull you back into this conversation. The person starts by saying, thank you for undertaking this project. It is really exciting. I live in South Four Corners near Blair High School. There are tons of families and older residents here. It is such a thriving area with so much potential, but the intersection of University and Colesville roads don't feel safe for pedestrians and are loud and unpleasant for walking. It feels like a freeway instead of a community. What plans do you have for improving the Four Corners area specifically?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I agree, it is a thriving area and has a lot of potential and also has a lot of pedestrian volumes and vehicular volumes. So I think, as was mentioned before, we don't have specific recommendations yet. This is definitely an area that we'll be focusing on, as I mentioned. I think a lot of the conversations that we've been having about safety and about pedestrian comfort, I might have mentioned some of the factors that can help to increase that, but intuitively increasing the separation between the sidewalk and the roadway, widening the sidewalk so that there's more space, trying to narrow crossing distances to make it more comfortable and safer to cross the street. Those are some of the things that we'll be thinking about. Again, weighed against the challenge that we have limited right-of-way and a lot of different needs to accommodate. But yeah, I really appreciate the question, and that's something we'll be giving a lot of thought to as we develop the plan.
Thanks, Alex. Just a second while I pull up the next question. Alex, I'm going to pull you back in. You have indicated that one option would be a side path. Can you talk about why this might be an option a planner would choose over a bike lane / sidewalk combo?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. And I apologize. I should have mentioned when I mentioned the bicycle master plan, it calls for a side path. There's also within the bicycle master plan a category known as a breezeway, and these are even a higher level of comfort for bicyclists, and that's what's designated in the bicycle master plan for much of University Boulevard. So why would we consider a side path as opposed to a bike lane and sidewalk combo? So I think it's helpful to clarify what type of bike lane we're talking about if we're comparing the two, but a conventional just striped bike lane would be in the roadway and essentially directly adjacent to vehicular traffic. And so that tends not to be as comfortable or as safe for cyclists who are traveling along the corridor adjacent to higher speed traffic. If we start to talk about, and maybe the question is going toward this sort of the separation between pedestrians and cyclists, even within whatever space there might be, for those modes, separated bike lanes would be both separated from vehicular traffic and from pedestrian space in the roadway as well. And the kind of separation that's used between the bikeway and the road can vary. So we heard earlier about the flex posts. It could be parked cars, although that's not the situation at University Boulevard, or even could be a more substantial, concrete or other type of barrier between the bicyclists and the traffic. On the other side, between the bicyclists and the pedestrians, that could also take a variety of separation, but tends to include some sort of buffer, some sort of landscape buffer or additional space. And so one of the considerations, as we've said a few times now, is right of way in this corridor and that we have a limited space to work in. The one other point that I would make about and I apologize again for just saying side path when it's a side path and a breezeway, there are a lot of layers of terminology in there, and I would encourage folks to check out the bicycle master plan to read more about those. The breezeway also includes separation or at least space for both pedestrians and cyclists. And that might not necessarily be a vertical physical separation, but it could be striping on the pavement that would indicate which spaces for cyclists and which spaces for pedestrians. So I hope that helps to answer the question, but I think the big one for a side path versus a bike lane would be additional separation and comfort from traffic.
Yeah, and don't go away yet, but I think I'm going to direct the next question to you too, which is the work done on Arcola Avenue to calm speeders has been excellent. Is that a model for university?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we'll be considering a variety of options. I think, some of the things that I understand were done there did kind of help to make it more comfortable for pedestrians to cross, kind of help to slow traffic. So it's a different road than University in that it handles a different volume of traffic and probably needs some different solutions. But I think some of the similar concepts could be at play.
Thanks, Alex. Hey, Sue, I'm going to pull you in for this next question, which is, can you share the plan for expanding Northwood High School? How many more students will this require? How many more students, will this require more busing? Will the development impact the land usage?
My apologies. I'm not in the quietest area of the house right now. But as far as what the expansion will do to the number of students, we don't know for sure. Just a sec. We don't know for sure because MCPS is planning a boundary change when Northwood High School is done. So we know the numbers will definitely go up because the capacity of the school will expand to about around 2,200 students, but we don't know if it'll be how much of that capacity will be used. But it will definitely be a larger school than now. But at the same time, we don't know where these students will be coming from yet because the boundaries change has not happened. In terms of the new building, I will follow up with a link to the plan that has been presented to, I believe, the Northwood High School PTA community for sure. And there has been some other community meetings sharing those plans. That is completely under MCPS's jurisdiction. But I can find the link to the plans that they have shared.
Thank you, Hesu. Chuck, if you're available, I'm going to pull you in for this next question, which pertains to parks. Will there be some improvement to Sligo Creek Park? Will some improvement to Sligo Creek Park be part of the project? So more beautification for the children's playground, removal of dead trees, better lighting in the park, and addressing water issues in the park.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Chuck Hines with Montgomery Parks. Yes, we will be looking at Sligo Creek Stream Valley Park as part of this plan. Some issues that we hear from the community will be able to address immediately if they're operational in nature, like dead trees that have to be removed or those sort of things. But some issues will be relevant to the master plan, like the crossing of the Sligo Creek Trail at University Boulevard. That's something that we will definitely be paying close attention to, as well as stormwater draining into Sligo Creek. Those sort of issues will be master plan issues. But other issues, like I said, could be addressed sooner if they're more operational and maintenance in nature.
Thanks, Chuck. So, Nkosi, I think this next question is for both of us here, which is this corridor includes 2 large high schools. Are you reaching out specifically to students for their input on what would improve their experience getting to and from the school? I understand that they will graduate before the plan is implemented, but I feel their input would be valuable.
Yes, so students are important. We're working with MCPS staff at the principals, but we're also working with Montgomery County Department of Transportation via the Vision Zero program to really get on the ground with students, and that should be coming up in the next month or so. So we're actually looking forward to that opportunity to partner with MCDOT to go into not only the high schools, but also the elementary schools in the plan area, and to listen to the issues that and suggestions that students have.
Yes, yeah, we are looking forward to engaging with the young population because they are in some ways a captive population, and then they'll also, if they live in the area, will end up using the area the improvements much longer than I assume most of us on this call. Alex, I'm going to pull you back in. The question's interesting, which is, why is there a proposed temporary solution being considered rather than going straight to the final approach?
Yeah, thank you. I can try to answer that one. And I think maybe kind of a little bit of context for the plan. We're developing a master plan for the entire University Boulevard corridor, and that includes a variety of topics, including transportation. I think this question might be referring to the effort that our colleagues at MCDOT are putting forward for bus lanes along University Boulevard. That is a pilot program that they've been advancing, and we're coordinating with them on that. So I think that's kind of part of a broader program that MCDOT has in a variety of places in the county. I believe Veers Mill is also on that list, and dedicated bus lanes in the Silver Spring area on Georgia Avenue. So as to why advancing a temporary solution in the meantime, I think it is helpful to see how these things work and to get feedback from the community. And we'll be taking that into account as we're developing our recommendations, but sort of that program is somewhat separate from the recommendations that we'll be developing as part of a longer term plan. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on that.
Jessica or Nkosi?
I can weigh in. This is Carrie Sanders, Chief of Mid-County Planning. Yes, so just to echo what Alex just said, MCDOT is doing a 12-month pilot for the bus lane. That is a separate project from the project that you're here tonight to hear about and to ask questions about. So the MCDOT project is a project that they're looking at doing for about 12 months. They're listing that as a 12-month pilot on their flyer, and we can put that flyer in the chat so everybody has it. And after that 12-month period of the bus lane, it's a striped bus lane, they're going to be evaluating that. Now, they're doing this in other parts of the county as well, and particularly doing it along routes that are having very high bus ridership, such as University Boulevard. They are welcoming comments and feedback, so I do encourage you to reach out to Gary Ehrenrich, who is the project manager. His information is listed on the flyer that we're going to share in the chat. And so they are taking comments from the public on the project. This project that you're here to learn about tonight is actually much longer term. So it's the vision for the corridor over the next 15 to 20 years. So it includes transportation, but master plans also are very important tools for the land that's along the roadway, as well as the commercial centers and the schools and institutions. So what you're hearing about tonight is a longer term plan. And what MCDOT, the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, is looking at is more of a short-term pilot program. So hopefully that answers the question. I know I did see in the chat there was a question as to why University Boulevard and why is there so much time being spent on it. And I think the simple answer to it is that we see a very high portion of severe and fatal crashes on this roadway. And it's incumbent upon us to address those issues. And we are being asked by the community to address these safety issues as well. And so particularly along a corridor where we have 2 high schools and many other schools as well, not high schools, but elementary schools and daycare facilities and so on, we want to make sure that this is a safe place for people to drive, to walk, to bike, to roll. And that's for the entire community's safety. So hopefully that answers some of the questions. I know there have been a lot of questions. We do appreciate the feedback, and we very much appreciate your participation. And we encourage you to continue to work with our excellent project managers, Zubin and Nkosi. And thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Zubin.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And Alex, I hope you haven't gone out, because the next question I'm going to again direct it to you. This is an interesting question, and I think this might be more pertinent for our colleagues in MCDOT. As a frequent bus rider in this corridor, I don't see a need for a dedicated bus lane and don't think a dedicated bus lane will speed up buses. However, there is a need for dedicated protected bike and pedestrian spaces. Will the bus lane pilot mean that pedestrians and bicyclists will be left without safer facilities?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I appreciate that as a user of multiple modes on the corridor, you understand some of the challenges of bus lanes, space for pedestrians, space for bicyclists. That's certainly something that's on our minds as we're working on this. I think thinking about bus speeds, I think that's a good point about will dedicated facilities speed buses, and I think it's easy to look at the corridor when vehicles are traveling at high speeds and think that there's not a need. I think one of the purposes of dedicated bus lanes is reliability. And so even though some times of day traffic is generally moving along pretty well and buses can move in that flowing traffic, at other times when congestion does increase, having a dedicated bus facility can help to provide a more reliable travel time for bus passengers. But even that aside, I think the question about will the bus lane pilot mean that peds and bikes will be left without safer facilities, that's certainly not my hope or intention. And I think I hope that I expressed earlier our concern with establishing safe and convenient facilities for all users of the corridor. So while the pilot might be going into place, that's something that MCDOT is able to implement pretty quickly, much in the same way that the multimodal pilot that resulted in the pilot bike lanes was able to be implemented quickly, and that it's relatively low cost way to install something on the ground. I think as we develop our recommendations, we're not looking at only the temporary condition, but also kind of a longer term or permanent condition. And I don't think that the pilot lanes would preclude our thinking about some of the things you described earlier, either wider sidewalks or a side path to accommodate pedestrian and bicyclist travel. Thinking about buffering that travel from vehicular traffic, that's one potential additional benefit of a transit lane if that does end up being the way that we go, in that the continuous volumes of individual transit vehicles might not be as high as passenger vehicles traveling in the adjacent lane, and provide a little bit more buffer from that higher speed traffic. So yeah, I think we're still thinking about a variety of ways to travel up and down the boulevard and ensuring that all of them are safe and convenient. And I wouldn't say that the pilot lanes would preclude the provision of those facilities.
Thanks, Alex. And before you go, there's a question about the use of protective barriers from vehicular traffic for pedestrians. And there's an addendum to that, which is, will there be greenery to make it more attractive?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think one of the questions earlier was about, how could we reduce the level of traffic stress on University Boulevard for bicyclists? I think this could be going in a similar direction of how can we reduce or increase the level of pedestrian comfort. And a lot of the similar considerations apply. And so that's one of them that you've identified here is, some sort of protective barrier or additional buffer between pedestrians and the roadway. And so that's one place where, again, either the transit lane or perhaps even more comfortable to be walking adjacent to would be the bicycle facilities. That if there's, if there is a separated bike lane and then a sidewalk, that further separates pedestrians from vehicular traffic. The question about, I think it was landscaping or some sort of greenery there to make it more attractive. Yes, I think that's also something we can think about, and is something that in the Complete Streets Design Guide we're trying to move toward throughout the county, is having a landscaped buffer between the roadway and the sidewalk to give a little bit more comfort and safety and attractiveness to the roadway.
Thank you, Alex. Nkosi, I'm going to bring you back into this conversation, which is, we have a question about, have you put ads with QR codes at bus shelters along University Boulevard? Many people who take buses don't directly live on the road and may not know about these planning meetings.
Yeah, so that's sort of the next phase of our outreach and engagement. So we're continuing to do things like that in terms of putting ads at the bus stops. So that's coming. They'll be coming as we continue to work on this project.
Great. And before you go, Nkosi, I have the next question for you too, which is, there are whole parts of neighborhoods included in the master plan. Can you please address what type of housing, retail is planned for these areas?
That's a good question. I think at this time we haven't developed any recommendations regarding that. So I think we will be, again, sort of focused and strategic and really be sort of more deliberate. That's the word I'm looking for. Deliberate regarding where we make recommendations along the corridor. So I think we still need to do the work. We cannot give you an answer this evening on that. That there's certain things, obviously Four Corners is an area, obviously the end and Amherst area, for example. But we're going to be quite deliberate in making recommendations, especially on the land use and zoning side of this project.
Sounds good. And Kosi, before you go, I think this is a question that you and Alex can kind of tag team on, which is University Boulevard a state road? And if so, what power does Montgomery County Planning / DOT have to change the configuration of the corridor?
Yes, the roadway is controlled by MDOT-SHA, but we've worked collaboratively with them on other roadways such as Veers Mill, Rockville Pike, Patrick Road, Georgia Avenue. So we as a department, we've done a lot of corridor plans in collaboration with the state agencies, as well as Montgomery County Department of Transportation. So yes, the state has a specific say, but we are providing direction to the state to do different things. And that's one of the good thing in terms of when these plans are built from the local level, is that we're able to advocate and push the state to do things differently. And that's really been the Veers Mill. Veers Mill is sort of a good example of that. So many of the recommendations, as Jessica noted earlier, really came from that planning effort that was done a couple of years ago for Veers Mill. Likewise, we're hopeful that the planning effort that we take on here for this portion of University Boulevard will also direct the state to move forward in a different direction to really address safety and other factors that we've been talking about.
Alex, any thoughts for this question about the fact that the state effectively controls the road?
Yeah, I don't think I have a whole lot to add other than just emphasizing again the coordination with our partners at both MCDOT and SHA. MCDOT has a hand in this operation of the signals along University Boulevard and in some of the maintenance. And as Nkosi said, we can influence the actions that our colleagues at SHA take. And I also just want to give kudos to some of the evolution and thought that's happening at SHA. The context-driven guide that they put out starts to move in the direction of a lot of the conversations that we've been having today about creating safer facilities for multimodal travel. And I can see if we can put that in the Q&A as well.
Great. I think we're nearing the end of our time here. Jessica or Nkosi, do you want to have some final concluding remarks? I would just like to add that we have a FAQ being developed in-house, and it should be on our website sometime this week, as early as tomorrow even. And of course, the presentation will also be posted on the website. This meeting was recorded, so you can likely see this meeting once again if you want to spend another exciting 2 hours watching some local government. But yeah, we'll have a lot of upcoming outreach. And Jessica and Nkosi, I'll leave it to you to make some final concluding remarks.
Thank you, Zubin. And just to echo a few things that Zubin mentioned, so we will have both the slides and the recording from the meeting tonight available on our website. And as Nkosi mentioned earlier, we're happy to meet with anyone and everyone at a time of your convenience, in person, virtually, telephone calls, emails. However you would like to connect with us, we're happy to connect with you. And we'd encourage you to reach out to us. We can put our contact information in the chat to make sure it's available. And also our website, which is www.montgomeryplanning.org/UBC. And we would really welcome the opportunity to meet with all of you. So there were some mentions in the chat of, please meet with this group, and we will be following up on those. So thank you very much for being here tonight. And I'll turn things over to Nkosi for final closing remarks.
Oh, thank you. We are appreciative of everyone taking the time out of your schedules to meet with us. We'll be back both in person in the coming weeks, community workshop, sort of building upon things and really listening to what your issues, concerns, solutions that you have that we could incorporate as we develop our plan recommendations moving forward. So look for sort of notice of that coming. That's likely going to be next month. We'll schedule that. And as Jessica noted, if you have a group, if you want to meet with us, whichever suits your preference, please let us know. We're willing to come to you. You come to us. Just let us know. So we're definitely appreciate everyone's time and all your questions that you asked this evening, and I know more will continue to come out of this process. So, Zubin, anything else before we wrap?
So as Nkosi and Jessica both mentioned, we will be available to answer your questions, and we'll be happy to come to where you are. If you live in one of the apartments, we might knock on your door after we get the necessary permissions from your property managers in the coming month or so. We are, of course, excited about doing outreach on and around the bus stops and in schools and in conversations with students. So over the next few months, as it hopefully gets warmer than it was today, you'll see us out and about in the community much more often. So if you see us, you know our faces, our names now, please stop by and say hello. And if you have any event, a weekend event or a fair or a community gathering, invite us. We'll be happy to come and join you. It doesn't have to be a formal presentation. We are just happy to be there and answer questions and engage with the community in the community space. So thank you again, everyone. Jessica, Carrie, any final thoughts?
No, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.